All right, you are back for a pandemic edition of the Kris and Jessi Show. I'm your co-host, Jess.
And I'm Krissy.
This week, we're going to be talking all about the new Netflix special that just launched on March 20th. It is Tiger King. And while we're in the middle of a pandemic and like 30% of Americans are either working from home or now unemployed or reduced hours, everyone's watching Netflix. Tiger King is currently number one, and Krissy and I just watched it. But first, we want to talk to you about our next sponsor. Okay, and that's the end of that sponsorship. So, Krissy, let's talk about how we know our friend Aaron Adams.
Do you want to wait a minute? Because we're still not actually on the page yet. We're still waiting on a link.
Let's just keep going, and we'll download if necessary.
Okay.
So why don't you share a little bit about how we know Aaron Adams, one of our special guests that's coming in a minute.
So I met Aaron Adams a few 3-4 years ago. I think through a shit posting group that we were in. She's hilarious and awesome, and I love her so much. She is very audaciously hilarious and
so one of the things that we talked about with Aaron about all the time was Joe Exotic and him running for governor. Do you remember her like constantly talking about how she was trying to keep him from being the candidate?
Yeah, like I know that she had an issue with him being the candidate because she had another candidate, I believe Lawhorn, and Joe was kind of crazy.
So also, we're going to be bringing up from the show Joshua Dial. Joshua was Joe's campaign manager. So we're going to be talking to Aaron, someone who worked on an opposing candidate's campaign, and Joshua, Joe's campaign manager. But I want to mention something about when I first met Joshua in 2018. So we met in the spring of 2018 at the Libertarian National Convention, and Joshua was just kind of quiet, very chill and mellow. And, it was a night where it was like 2 nights out or a night out before people started coming to town. And I was a little just like overwhelmed because I was going to see a lot of friends. And so I really didn't take a lot of time to get to know Joshua. And now this has taught me such like a big life lesson that Joshua had an insane, crazy story, a lot of things going on in his life. And had I taken some time to just really get to know him, he would have been able to tell me this like crazy story that I wouldn't have almost believed until it was like actually a Netflix documentary. So, all right. So we just lost Krissy for a minute, but I'm going to bring on now our special guests, Joshua and Aaron, and we're going to start sharing some of the questions that we have for you. But we want to know from both of you, what has your reaction been like in the 4 days since this Netflix documentary has premiered? Like, reactions have you had? Like, what has it been like? Has it changed your life in any ways?
It hasn't changed my life. I got a lot of, Josh, I don't know about you. I got a lot of text messages and DMs and people going, "Hey, I saw you on Netflix." And I'm like, fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm having to deal with like friend requests. I'm getting like 25 to 30 every hour on Facebook. So it's something I've never dealt with before. But besides that, nothing's changed.
You were pretty prominently displayed as Joe Exotic's campaign manager. And so you have a pretty big part in that series.
Yeah, I wish I would have got a lucrative deal, period. I didn't get any kind of deal.
Right, that would have been nice.
All right, well, if your lives...
That would be in keeping with the spirit of Joe Exotic, at least.
Well, your lives haven't changed much yet. Are you getting more sex? I feel like you should be getting a lot of sex.
No, I'm working so much I don't have time for sex. Sex is a fond memory right now.
What about you, Josh? Are the ladies and men just hopping on it?
They're trying, but I'm engaged, so I'm
he's got an amazing fiance. Tell Jackie I said hi. I love him.
As we know, apparently if you're in the cat world, you are polyamorous. So
Yeah, well, the zoo people are crazy. The craziest group of people I seen was the monkey people. Like for his wedding, it was a wedding / monkey ball, and he had all these ladies from all around the country bring monkeys, baby monkeys and stuff, and dressed them in horrid little doll dresses and stuff, and just had a bunch of old decrepit old monkeys stuffed in dresses for his wedding. And those are the craziest group of people that I ever met in the zoo world. So there are crazier people than cat people, believe it or not.
oh my God.
So when did you two both meet? You were working on opposing campaigns. How did you first learn about each other?
We were working on opposing campaigns, and we were at I think it was the open close discussion. It was something that was going on kind of prior, and met there. And we became friends pretty quick. I mean, I could see like Josh's heart pretty quick, and he's a sharp dude, right? And like he gets this shit. And he was going, holy fuck, somebody has got to help me because this candidate is like batshit fucking crazy. And he would know libertarianism if somebody beat him to death with it. And what the fuck, man? And I like shit. And we're just like, we'll pray for you because I don't know what else to do. Your dude is crazy. I mean, Josh worked his ass off to try and keep his candidate like on platform and to try to explain libertarianism to Joe, because just really all you can do at that point. Here's somebody who's coming in. You have zero control over who runs on your ballot line in Oklahoma. I want to be really clear about that because a lot of people like were hammering Josh and hammering me. And how could you guys let him run? Do you want us to kill him? Because that's literally the only option. In Oklahoma, Donald Trump could move to Oklahoma, register to vote as a libertarian, and run as a libertarian. There's not a damn thing we could do, right? So at that point, your options are like curl up in a fetal position in the corner and cry, or try and surround this dude with libertarianism, right? And like bring him to the dark side because that he's family, whether you like him or not. He was absolutely, that uncle at Thanksgiving that you don't want your kids to go near because he might touch them wrong.
Oh no!
But you have to tolerate him because he's still family, right? That was Joe.
Yeah. I mean, this guy, the depth of his ignorance. I mean, we would go to forums and, be a Republicans, Democrats, and Libertarians all in one forum. And, we'd leave and he'd say, oh, I like Connie Johnson. Is she a Republican? And, this is a candidate, a fellow, candidate for the governorship. And he doesn't even know what party these people are.
Some of the best shit from that campaign did not make it into the documentary. Like, do you remember the night he asked Gary Jones if he did meth? Or was it Fisher? Maybe it was Fisher. He asked Fisher. He's like, have you ever done meth? Because I have, and let me tell you. And the dude is just like, what the fuck did he just say to me?
Oh my God.
And Fisher was one of his opponents?
A theocrat.
Well, he's a preacher.
Yeah, he's a theocrat.
Yeah.
Like he's asking these people, like he asked so many weird guys, weird shit. Like, all the campaign staff, if you've ever worked a campaign, you're managing a campaign, your candidate's up on the stage and you're at the back of the room. The whole back wall is everybody's campaign manager, right? We all know each other because you see each other all the time. And Joe would start talking and Josh would just go, we're all just like, oh my God, Joshy, we're so sorry, right? Like opposing candidates are like, buddy, we love you. It'll be okay. Like Josh had some love from opponents' campaign managers. We all felt the pain. We've all had that candidate, but his candidate like took the cake.
Aaron and I had a hand signal, and I would go like this, and it was just we just clicked.
Like you needed to grab Josh and get Josh outside. He needs a little bit of marijuana for a minute because this shit is gonna kill him.
Did Josh or did Joe really think that he was gonna win and become the governor?
Yeah. And realistically, there were a couple scenarios that depending on your perspective, he may have been able to do much better than he did. And one would have been if we'd had an open primary system in Oklahoma. We chose to close our primaries that year. I mean, part of it was I know part of it was because of Joe. If independents had been allowed to vote in our primary, Joe spoke to them, right? Those were his people at the time, and it would have been a very different thing. I know Chris Powell likes to get on and be like, yeah, I saved the day. Well, you know, Chris was a big proponent for open primaries, and if he had got his way, Joe would have slaughtered him.
Aaron, weren't you a state party leader of the Libertarian Party of Oklahoma?
Okay, so ish. So what happened? I was a regional chair at the time. My region had 7 counties, and I was managing a gubernatorial campaign, not Joe's, and I did not want to run for chair. I really didn't. Josh will tell you he was there. I was pretty adamant, but I had a lot of people come to me and express a desire for me to do so, and I caved. So I ran. And what that meant was I had to resign any connection with one campaign, right? I can't favor any of these candidates over any of the others, and they're all my candidates, and I have to be willing to help every one of them when they ask for help from the minute I won. So at the convention where I was elected chair, I want to be really clear that the Oklahoma Libertarian Party voted at that convention without objection to censure Joe Exotic. There were several abstentions. The other candidates chose to abstain. They didn't want anybody to think that it was, you know, political. But no one spoke in Joe's defense, and he was censured for multiple violations of bylaws in the NAP. Joe was absolutely a shady guy. Joe did a lot of shit wrong. Joe is also human and had a very human heart, and could be an absolute joy to be around when he let his guard down and was being really real. And Joe suffered a lot of tragedy, real tragedy to him, right, wrong, or indifferent. And there are certainly opinions on both sides of that. And his deceased husband's family certainly weren't treated well. There was a lot of stuff, but Joe did love Travis for all his faults. He did in his own way, and that was really hard for him.
So to kind of transition, I just have a really important question that's important to me. I know that everyone can see my beautiful Carole that I have.
You're channeling your inner Carole?
I'm channeling my inner Carole. I have my headband, my bright white eyeshadow, my leopard print.
But you gotta do this. And everybody's a cool cat, remember?
You know, cool
cats
cat.
and kittens.
There
you go.
I got to giggle when we talk about my husband disappearing. So one thing about the physical appearances of people on this show that I just have to know, Josh and Aaron, when you were in Joe Exotic's presence, did you ever just like look at him and be like, hold on, let me fix your eyebrow ring?
All the time. Not just his eyebrow ring. Like that damn string for his holster that was always flapping on his leg. It was insane, right? And the fringe leather jackets. What the fuck is up with the fringe leather jackets? Joe actually said to me at one point that a lot of them were women's jackets because they didn't make men's jackets with those fringes.
Oh my gosh.
And he would auction those fuckers off.
Josh, as his campaign manager, why didn't you get his eyebrow re-pierced?
You know, I actually never really looked closely at Joe Exotic's eyebrow until the
okay,
meeting started.
Look at my background right now. Do you see it?
I mean, it just would have sagged. Even if he had it redone, it would have just kept sagging. Do you see that face?
It's like
Joe, he thought he was a 10. You know, he thought he was hot.
He thought that mullet was hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, who had the best hair out of Carole, Doc, or Joe?
Oh, Doc. Doc has the best hair.
What do you think? What do you think, Josh? Who has the best hair?
Oh well, I gotta say Joe because because I remember hearing how much he paid to get it done.
I mean, those plugs, right? And color.
He didn't do his own hair.
No, he had to have done his own hair. Like
no, he paid for that shit.
Yeah, he
a lot.
No,
get his hair done, something like that. I mean, that
may
not be a lot for most people, but
it looked like it was 3 concise layers.
Oh my god!
Hey, it's 3 different bowls. It's graduated serving bowls is what it
was
is.
Bowl haircut for sure.
Look,
it's
Joe
mostly gray now, though. Like when I went to his sentencing, his final hearing where they sentenced him, and he walked in the courtroom, and like it was like he looked like a
different person.
Looked like a ghost was walking in the room. I mean,
look, Joe
gray and completely, it was weird.
Look, Joe was batshit crazy, and he did a whole lot of stupid and heinous shit. But he got set up like a motherfucker. He did.
Yeah, I think that's actually really clear on the show. Like when I was watching it, like even with my bias against Joe, I was like, oh, that motherfucker got set up.
Look, like, let me be clear. You guys know I had bias against Joe early on. But then I was the chair and he was one of mine. And this was a railroad job.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, I have so much reason to hate Joe, and I do in many ways. But at the same time, I mean, I can't let that hatred blind me to the fact that the guy was set up. I mean, and it speaks to, the type of government we have where they can just kind of come in and, like Aaron said, railroad you and end up, getting you screwed up over some words exchanged.
Like, I don't believe for 3 seconds that he paid Alan a couple grand to kill somebody. Joe was stupid, but he wasn't that stupid. He wasn't stupid enough to think you could get a decent hitman for 3 or 4 or 5 grand. He just wasn't. I fully believe that Joe paid Alan to get the fuck out of there because Joe hated Alan. Hated him. They butted heads all the time. And if Alan had said to him, if you give me 3 grand, I'll walk, Joe would have done it quick.
Do you think that this will be like another making a murderer thing where the internet gets involved and investigates and finds out that Joe was set up and maybe things will change?
Look, I hope so. Look, Joe wasn't fully set up. A lot of the FDA charges Joe was absolutely guilty of, right? A lot of the Department of Ag charges he was absolutely guilty of. He admitted to a lot of them, right? He admitted to euthanizing tigers. He admitted to selling cubs. He admitted to a lot of that stuff. So he wasn't completely innocent in this.
The murder for hire was...
And he absolutely wanted Carole dead. Make no mistake.
If
somebody would have killed her, he would have celebrated. I would have too. But I don't believe he paid Alan. Joe did a lot of times saying, man, I wish somebody would just kill her. There's a video somewhere. Josh, do you remember the day he made the dummy of her and stuffed it with the tannerite and shot the tannerite and blew her up?
Yeah.
That's out there.
I can't even imagine being you, Josh, and having this as a candidate. I've been a candidate before, and my campaign manager just had to make sure I didn't talk about recreational cocaine. You have to make sure that yours isn't smoke meth and blow up dummies.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. I mean, I knew though if this guy was unleashed and they just hired someone else, some random person that they might very well destroy the party as we know it here in Oklahoma along with them. I mean, there was a very, very strong push to get the primaries opened, like Karen was talking about. And I mean, we had tons of independent support. So, I mean, at one point, before the accident, that was my calculation is, I'm going to stay and see what I can do to kind of salvage this. And, it turned really bad towards the end, and it turned into like a trap that I couldn't get out of, and I felt obligated to stay, like I said before, for the sake of the party and for all the people, but also the people that he fooled. I mean, we got
there were a lot of them.
664 votes, and that don't seem like a lot, but that was, I think, 18% of
registered libertarians, not of independents. 600. Over 600 registered libertarians, people who claim to understand the philosophy and the principle, looked at Joe Exotic and said, that's who I'm voting for. Now, imagine if those floodgates had been thrown open and independents who don't subscribe to any philosophy, who don't support the NAP, who don't understand what we're about, had been allowed to vote in that primary. Imagine what would have happened.
How did he find the Libertarian Party?
So he ran for president as an independent, and the night of the 2016 watch parties, right? We had promoted our watch party, and Joe showed up then. I met Joe that night initially. And he was talking about, man, I've been looking at the Libertarian Party, and I'm a Libertarian, and I'm like, cool, stick around, you know. He's like, no, I think I'm going to run for president again. I'm like, cool, stick around, right? Like that's what we do. Come on in, have a seat, you know, try and get comfortable. But that was the last time I saw him until he decided he was going to run for governor. I think originally his plan was to wait until this cycle and run for president as a Libertarian. And as a matter of fact, he had already filed with the FEC to do so. I mean, if you go to the FEC's page, he's a declared candidate for the Libertarian Party for POTUS.
Yeah, we were already gearing for the presidential run, like right before he.
The gubernatorial run was just a way to build support and build name recognition for that presidential run. It really was going to all be about the presidential run.
So did any of his opponents take him seriously?
I think there were times that they did, because there were times that they had to. Look, you should never write off any opponent in a race. If you're smart, you don't ever write off any opponent in a race. You take every one of them seriously, because you have to. The minute you stop taking them all seriously, that's when somebody's going to kick you in the nuts, man. If you're smart, you take them all seriously.
It's true, because I mean, if people like Aaron wouldn't have been there and you know, to block people, I mean, yeah, people like me, you know, I mean, it was my job. So, you know, we tried to open the primaries. If we would have, I mean, the parties, the message on a whole would have been watered down, and so watered down that, I mean, you wouldn't even really be honestly able to look at it and call it libertarian anymore.
It would have been libertarians are batshit crazy freak, right? And that's been the mantra for so many years, really since probably Maru. We hear it all the time, and then stripteases at national conventions and dildo waving from the floor, and that shit doesn't help. As libertarians, we're like, y'all need to like get a thicker skin and take shit less seriously and enjoy your fucking life, right? But the general public doesn't share that philosophy.
So, now to kind of transition back to kind of the show, what do you guys both think about Carole, and why is the first word that comes to your mind cunt?
Josh and I have had many drunken high nights bitching about Carole Baskin. That bitch is fucking evil. Look,
so
Joe,
how did you meet or run across her?
So really, like, Joe, if you met Joe, and anybody who met Joe back then, especially, Carole Baskin's name became seared into your memory, right? Why is somebody so triggered by this person? And all you have to do is spend about 15 or 20 minutes really looking into her on your own. And if you don't walk away from that saying this bitch is fucking evil, there's something wrong with you. For me, though, my dad was a herpetologist growing up, and he had a friend who dealt in exotic reptiles and amphibians. And Doc was around then. Doc doesn't limit himself to cats. I know the show focused on his cats, and he has more cats probably than anything, but he has all kinds of shit. Doc Antle deals in everything, right? And so, and he had spoken out about Carole for a long time. It wasn't just Joe. A lot of other people, if you've been part of that world at all, the exotic trade, you know Carole's name.
I don't want to.
She goes after everybody. She goes after everybody.
Yeah, she seemed absolutely psychotic, and I definitely don't want to be a big cat person. It's actually almost making me not want to be a little cat person.
I firmly believe she killed her first husband.
Oh fuck yeah, she did.
She probably ate him. He was probably her dinner.
Like, I couldn't believe all of the subplots of this show. Like, there's Carole killing her husband. There's Doc Antle that has a sex cult.
It is a sex cult, right? and honestly, watching it, I was like, fuck, I should have gotten to know Doc better back in the day.
Yeah, you could have been
him.
Right?
Like, did you
I could have been part of the harem.
Do you know everyone, Aaron?
So Doc Antle used to do, like, herpetology conferences and exotic bird conferences, and he that's part of where he gets his money, right? He's a doctor. It's something, isn't it like mystical studies or some shit, Josh?
Yeah, mystical science.
Aaron, how does this movie intertwine like multiple facets of your entire life?
I know, right? And it's not just me, like it's Josh too. Like pretty much anybody who's dealt with animals has dealt with one or more of these people.
This is so crazy. So this
and they're not the only ones. Like, what's the dude in the other Joe, Josh and Broken Arrow, Safari Joe? He's another one, right? Like, there's another one. There's a lot of these people around. And so PETA pops them and stuff comes up, but they always
like
walk.
A crazy subculture that like is pretty limited in the amount of people involved in it.
Yeah, it's like a really extreme furry scenario.
Yeah.
Speaking of, expensive too and dangerous.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous.
How? No, I would never in my life think that like the lion and tiger trade was this like ridiculous.
Dude, it's not just the lions and tigers though. It's lions and tigers. It's monkeys. Exotic birds is a really big one. I bred exotic parrots for many years. It's another one that's very cutthroat like that.
Why can't these people just go and pick up some kitties from the Humane Society?
Well, even those people get really cutthroat. Then you start dealing with the whole backyard breeder stuff and the kitty mills. And
our next sponsor is your local Humane Society. Don't get a tiger. You don't need a bobcat. You don't need a lynx. And who the hell needs a liger? Just go get a little teeny tiny tiger.
Yeah. Speaking of,
Humane societies right now too are really overburdened, and a lot of people are locked in quarantine and alone, and there's no reason for you to be alone. Josh, you just got a new puppy, didn't you? Krissy's got pussy in her lap.
Yeah. Tell me how this isn't as cute as a little cub.
You have a beautiful pussy, sweetheart.
Thank you. This is my little kitty. Do I look like Carole now? Like rubbing my kitty?
There you go. She's playing with her pussy on live stream.
So what?
Y'all need to send her some money.
People in Oklahoma and people around like Wynwood, Oklahoma think of the GW Zoo?
So in Wynwood, it was pretty mixed. Like and Paul's Valley is another kind of support surrounding community there. It's pretty mixed from what I saw. Josh?
Yeah, I mean it's just a big old mix of people. I mean you just wouldn't believe it.
I mean, Joe did a lot of good stuff in the community. Like he had a huge community Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners. He'd done it for years. He fed a lot of people. He took care of a lot of people. So what people tend to remember is, especially when they're hurting and when they're struggling and then when they're down and out, is who fed them, who clothed them, who loved them. And Joe did that for them.
Didn't Joe take the donation money from one of those dinners to pay for his murder for hire plot?
Well, I mean, that's the argument. But if you watch back through the show, I think he took Jeff Lowe's money.
For sure.
To him for doing it, because Jeff's a dick.
Yeah.
Come for me, Lowe, you little fucking bald motherfucker.
Yeah. I the thing about Joe and the reason why there's going to be a lot of allegations and accusations, but nothing concrete, is that Joe, he compartmentalized a lot of his stuff. I mean, like he trusted me with the campaign and the social media stuff. And, each person that worked for him had a different function. But as far as money goes and collecting money, doing money, spending money, all that was Joe and only Joe.
Yep.
So, I mean, I can't speak to that. I can't speak to anything to do with the money, to be honest with you, because that's the one thing that Joe did not, put out there for other people to do for him.
I mean, Jeff Lowe likes to say that he was funding everything, right? And he was rolling and he was financing everything. But the couple of times that I interacted with Jeff did not strike me as somebody who had any real money.
Yeah, he struck me as like a meth little kingpin of like the trash.
I remember thinking he took that Ferrari for a test drive and just didn't return it, and that's how he got it. Like in my gut, and I'm not saying that's what he did for sure, but I mean that was my gut. Was like I kept waiting for the cops to show up to repo that shit. He's a creepy little dude, man. And like I'm 5'2", and I don't think Jeff's taller than me.
What?
He's a little bitty dude.
He probably.
Josh, how tall do you think Lowe is?
Yeah, probably 5'8". He's
a little motherfucker.
Yeah.
And you know why he wears that bandana and that hat, right? He liked to fuck with Joe about his hair, but at least Joe had hair.
So did you guys ever participate in cub petting? That's a term that I've never used before in my life until now.
Yeah, I didn't. Now, Josh cared for animals there. It wasn't really cub petting for him. He fed animals and he cleaned cages and he trained and he did all of that.
Well, the thing is like after Travis died, it was the winter, and just as all businesses, during the winter, it's slow season. You got to cut employees. So he cut the photographer and videographer out of the budget, and I started doing photography for him. So I go on 2 tours a day, and take pictures of people and sell the CDs to them. So I got like really close with them. I mean, there were sometimes I would go out with Saf. That was the guy with one arm from the documentary. Me and him would go up to Oklahoma City, and we'd have a baby tiger in the back with a little metal cage, portable metal cage. And we'd set up at private parties and just let the tiger hang out in the house and, set the cage up so it wouldn't escape.
I know you missed your cats when you left there. Yeah. You missed those animals so much.
There was definitely amazing parts of that job that, experiences that I got that, I'll never forget.
Well, and not just you. I know Rick's probably feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So is petting a baby tiger the same as petting a cat?
Look, people go to petting zoos all the time across the country. I don't know how it's different if it's a tiger versus if it's a baby donkey or if it's a baby kangaroo or a goat.
I'm scared of all animals that are smaller than me, except for dogs and cats, because I'm irrational.
You and Carole would get along great.
I am Carole.
There is a cruel aspect to the cub petting thing, though. I mean, like I remember times when they come over the radio and say, like, cub's got diarrhea so bad that it's bleeding from wiping its butt, in between cub pettings and stuff like that. Like, there's some serious things that go on that, I mean, if you're an animal lover, you would cringe at. So you had to have, I mean, I love animals. I've got a dog, but I mean, you got to really be a special kind of person to be able to stand up and deal with that kind of stuff on a daily basis.
I know it ate at you a lot.
Yeah.
What kind of people visited the zoo and where did they come from? India.
That was the big customer base. Wow. It was like 80% of the people that walked through there were Indian American people. I mean, they had the full accent and everything.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people from all over the place, but it was anytime you went, there were a lot of people from India.
Yeah,
do you think it's because like their culture likes tigers, or is?
I mean, maybe it was a way to connect with home, to see something familiar. When you travel, sometimes don't you want to eat, food that reminds you of home, or see a movie that reminds you of home. So
I live in rural Ohio, so I'd have to just find some corn.
What I noticed was older generations were bringing younger Indian American people that were born, the kids that were from here, and taking them to see the tigers to say, hey, we got these in the wild at home. Try to connect them back to their heritage. That's really the biggest share of what I've seen come through.
Yeah, it's a homesick thing, I think. Just a way to connect with home.
That's definitely really interesting. So gay, polygamist, gun-toting, tiger wrangling, country singing, magician.
Former sheriff. Magician.
Former sheriff. Okay, so
wasn't he like the youngest elected sheriff in Texas?
Allegedly.
Oh,
at like 18 or 19.
So I definitely didn't have a question. I just really wanted to list off all those titles.
There's probably more. Josh, you could probably add a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, Josh, do you have another title that has to be as interesting as gay polygamist?
Explosive fanatic?
Well, I mean, that almost goes with gun-toting. I just find Joe to be a really interesting character. When I was watching the show, I'd be like every 20 minutes, he had a whole new thing that he did. Like, oh, he's also a polygamist. Oh,
he's a preacher. He's a preacher. He was an ordained preacher, and he did perform weddings and funerals and.
So speaking of his performances, is that his real singing voice?
No,
in these music videos?
no,
It's not.
no. I've heard Joe sing. That is not Joe.
Oh, my heart is broken.
And every time he would do karaoke, like to say, Joe was, it was bigger than the zoo, right? And I don't think people know that either. There was not just the zoo and the pizza place. Joe had, there was a restaurant attached and a hotel.
Oh my God, I cannot imagine
the RV park.
nice place
and the RV park. So the restaurant was actually pretty decent. The food was really good. Joe was really, he was a hardliner with his staff there. Like if you fucked up, you knew it, and he didn't want anything fucking up or coming out fucked up. He was really that restaurant. He was pretty firm about, but they had a karaoke set up in there. And so when Joe would go in to eat, when you'd go down, Joe would call you and he'd say, "Hey, come down and have dinner with me, and let's talk about this issue," or "Come down and have dinner with me and let's talk about whatever." And I know, like Rex Longhorn, for sure, he did not want Joe going off the rails. He was always willing to have those conversations. "Okay, man, let's talk. You want to talk principle and philosophy? Let's do it." So you'd go down to have dinner, and Joe would get up to do karaoke. And, you know, when you or I or Josh or when we get up to do karaoke, it's just our voice, right? It's our voice and music, not Joe. Joe would blare like the studio recording of his own song that he was going to sing, and then like lip sync to it or barely sing over it, like because his voice was so bad.
Well, I liked the music videos, and the internet, I think, does as well.
Yeah, the music videos
Here Kitty Kitty. I mean, I think I watched it 3 times.
Here Kitty Kitty was definitely a dig at Carole.
Oh yeah. Like he found someone dressed as Carole.
Like looked just like Carole.
It's my new favorite song, and I kind of want it to be my wedding song, but I'm already married.
Well, I after Travis died, Joe had a song. He bought a song off of somebody and rewrote it for Travis, you know, in memory. And we went to Dallas to an actual recording studio, and like I was shooting him singing it. And I mean, I always knew he was bad, but it was so bad. I mean, you know, was it not under the circumstance that his husband had just died like a month ago? I would have saved that shit, because I always knew when I was working for Joe, he was going to go down. You know,
right.
he was fucking with the wrong people. He had the wrong people, too many of the wrong people around him.
Seriously.
So,
like Josh would call and be like, "Dude, I might die if I stay here. I've got, what the hell?"
Wow. And meanwhile, like he knew that there was like a documentary being filmed. Like how often did the producers and everybody come for like that? It seems like they were there.
So they were there. Yeah, it was a while. So they caught like one of the parades in the documentaries, the Parade of Lights in Oklahoma City. One of them was Oklahoma City Pride. So from Christmas all the way into the summer, right? And then we had the watch party night was, you know, election night. So they were there at least a year. And they showed up everywhere Joe showed up. I want to see the outtakes, the shit they didn't put in the documentary, because there are literally thousands of hours of film that they didn't make it to the final. And some of that, I promise you, was questionable. Well, I remember the Pride Parade and Joe being on top of that limo, and it was crazy.
Well, I know for sure, speaking for myself, like there's whole interview sessions that I did with them that didn't show up at all on the series. So I'm wondering if maybe they're going to try to make a part 2 of it.
They might, because I was wondering where all the footage is from the wrestling. So Joe had this thing about wrestling events in Texas. So he would take his crew and his campaign staff across the border into Texas to do all these wrestling events and shit. And like amateur backyard wrestling events and shit. It was a big deal for him.
When it ended, I was like, I could watch this for so much.
You should have lived it. You should have lived it.
I mean, I've got friends still from the zoo industry, and somehow Joe's seeing all this stuff and posting from prison, and he's just loving it, you know. And like so many people are like, Carole killed her husband. I mean, he's got to be somewhat vindicated.
He's got to, right?
Yeah, because everyone, you can't not watch that and think that lady was not somehow involved in the disappearance of her husband.
Well, and look, like I said, I'm not going to tell you Joe's not batshit crazy. Joe's batshit crazy. Joe is a thorn in my side and a pain in my ass. And 9 days out of 10, I just wanted to choke the living shit out of him, right? But Joe got set up. This was a railroad job. I want to be really, really clear about that.
I 100% believe that. And I believe Carole's in on it because Carole's a fucking cunt and that's what Caroles do.
And yeah, I mean, there were... Nobody in the party was like, yay, Joe Exotic, right? We're all like, oh, fuck. But let me tell you that during a lot of those times, everybody in the party, even with the censure, and then at the last convention, after his conviction, he was expelled. There was an expulsion from the party. Also unanimous. You can't violate the NAP, and Joe did violate the NAP in a lot of ways. Regardless of Carole, he did. Even with that, at the lowest points, libertarians in Oklahoma rallied around him and supported him, regardless of their feelings about him. Because at the end of the day, one of the big differences between our party and the other parties is that we're family. People who like leave and then they come back, those people are still family, right? And so, yeah, everybody in the party, his opponents were at his husband's funeral and helped set up chairs at his husband's funeral. They did.
Josh, it seemed to me that like Joe actually, and Kryssi and I talked about this earlier, he really did care about the animals. It didn't look like they were mistreated. Did you kind of get that sense when you were working with him?
Yeah, I guess I would describe Joe's like kind of attitude towards animals as like a Genesis, kind of view. God gave man dominion over earth and animals and whatnot. And I think, he loved them, but he saw them as mainly as a way to make money, and little more than that.
I don't think it started there, but that's definitely where it got.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. That's where it ended for sure.
At the beginning for Joe was totally anti-cub petting. He was anti a lot of that shit. But I think for Joe, he got over his head really quick, right? So now you've got all these animals you have to feed. And his self-esteem was always... make no mistake, a lot of the shit that you saw from Joe Exotic, you saw because he suffered from incredibly low self-esteem for a lot of really good reasons. He had not lived a life that had boosted him as a human being. He just hadn't. So that was there, and that was definitely an undercurrent. And I think he got to the point that he needed to continue to be able to live this persona and still feed these animals. And so he was willing to make compromises along the way that, we talk about compromise a lot as politicians and as political operatives and the need for compromise. But you get to a point where if you're always willing to compromise on everything, you just start slipping, right? It's a slippery slope to an endless hole. And Joe kind of followed that slope. He just did. And then Carole Baskin didn't help. That $1 million lawsuit. That was really the beginning of the end for Joe.
So what do you hope that viewers take away from the show after watching it?
I mean, the biggest one for me is don't trust the fucking police and understand that our justice system is incredibly fucking corrupt. It's more corrupt than the bad guys we're trying to incarcerate. It just is. And just know that people are all flawed. Every one of us is just a decision or two away, a hardship or two away from becoming Joe. Like, know that.
Did you guys ever eat expired Walmart meat?
And yeah, that's actually like the meat at the restaurant. Like if you ate anything at the restaurant, you were eating.
That he bought for the tigers.
Like I remember the truck would get there, and like people reported him all the time. I mean, he was reported like on a monthly basis, but he was always able to beat the inspectors by the time they got up there.
Well, and two, not all of that was expired. So the way it works at Walmart, like those people that have to walk out and leave their cart because their card was declined or whatever, that stuff can't go back on the shelf either. So it goes into a cooler. That meat wasn't just like sitting out rotting. It was kept in a cooler, and then it went from that cooler into the truck. So what the staff would have to do is dig through what was in there and find the stuff that wasn't expired yet. Right. And that's what they tried to eat was stuff that wasn't expired. Because there's a big mix.
Did you guys, I know you, Josh, have probably met him. John Finley, which is Joe's first husband that he married.
Well, not really. John Finley is not Joe's first husband.
Okay. Oh, well, he's the first one in the trio.
Right. So Joe's first husband died. There was a trio before John and Travis and Joe.
Oh my!
It was John and Joe's first husband and Joe. That didn't get covered. Joe's first husband died, also.
Oh wow! So
oh jeez.
So okay, so his first husband and his second set of trio. Mm-hmm. Okay. Did he always not wear a shirt? And have you ever sat and counted his teeth?
I've seen him in a shirt. I've never counted his teeth, but his little girl is amazing. Him and Amber's little girl, and Joe loved her. Joe thought that baby could do no wrong. They painted it like Joe and John had this horrific split and never talked and shit, and that's not how it was. I mean, Amber still worked at the zoo, and their daughter called Joe Uncle Joe, and he loved that baby.
That's so weird.
He carried her everywhere. She could do whatever she wanted. That child could have pissed all over you, and if you'd have said anything, Joe would have whooped your ass.
Yep.
Josh, you got a chance to say "fuck the feds" on a Netflix documentary, which a lot of libertarians are excited to hear. So, what are you hoping that people are going to take away from the show?
Well, I mean, like I said before, besides the obvious glaring, I mean, the facts are there that it was a setup. So I hope a lot of people will kind of think twice and really kind of open their eyes to what the government's doing. But more importantly, like, what happened to the tigers and all this? What happened to saving their, saving the rainforest, saving the tigers, saving their natural habitats? Like, it's all got lost in this mess of a documentary and mess of a legal fight that they've had. And I just wish people would pull away and take away that, there's more tigers in captivity than there are in the wild. I don't necessarily personally believe that legislation like the Big Cat Safety Act is necessary, but there should definitely be some awareness. I think communities, definitely, and local municipalities should have a right to say, within our town zone, we don't want tigers. I don't necessarily think that on a federal level there should be a ban. But I think really what people should be going for is looking at this the political part of this and the fight.
Well, and two, it wasn't just tigers. I know everybody's focusing on tigers because it's called Tiger King, but that zoo had monkeys and birds and alligators and all. Nobody knows where those animals are right now.
I bet they're with Carole, and she's probably feeding something to them. And that's
another husband,
probably her second husband.
Yeah, and that poor guy. Do you guys not feel bad for him? I feel like he's terrified. If he said anything wrong, she might feed him to the tigers.
I feel like he watches her fuck other men because that's what gets him off.
Probably.
So do you guys think that places like the GW Zoo should exist, and should people be able to keep exotic animals as pets?
I think there are a lot of places that have exotics, right? Not just the GW Zoo, but nobody would question this if we were talking about the Toledo Zoo, right? So I think that zoos serve a really important part of the conservation picture. They're really important in that. And it's bigger than education. A lot of it is reproduction and breeding programs. And breeding programs are needed. The problem is it can't stop there, right? We have to consider natural habitat and how do we re-release animals and how do we reintroduce animals. You don't want these animals to only exist in zoos, and tigers are not the only ones that are nearing that type of extinction. It is a bigger thing. So yeah, zoos are important, but it's important too that when you walk through a zoo as a patron, just like when you walk through any other business as a patron, if you think that they're doing things that are shady, stop patronizing them. You know, just there are a lot of places. There's 3 or 4 of those safari places in Oklahoma. Joe is certainly not the only one. Lost Creek in Stillwater does it right. They don't have a whole lot of. They don't have big cats. They've got, you know, peacocks and monkeys and stuff that's a little bit easier to take care of at their level. They're not trying to be something that they aren't. Safari Joe's in Broken Arrow does a pretty good job. There's a place in Tuttle, Oklahoma, does a pretty good job. If you look in your state,
murderers too.
No, I don't think they're all murderers. I think some of them are just like the crazy old cat lady, but she's got wallabies, right? But if you look in your state, there are probably several exotic animal parks where you're at.
Yeah, my state actually was on the documentary for a city that was right next to where I grew up, called Zanesville. When this guy's little exotic thing, he let them out. Mm-hmm. So that's why Ohio has really strict laws now, and I'm not allowed to have a cub, and so I have to have a cat.
At the same time, people let out all kinds of dogs. We've got wild feral dogs running in packs and killing people and killing livestock all across the country, and nobody thinks twice about it. It's only when it's a bear, right? So this thing happens all across every animal species. The same type of behavior happens with these same types of people.
All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think people are going to have a lot of questions for you in the future, especially as more and more people start to unravel the all the details involved with Joe Exotic's criminal case. And we personally ourselves do not have a position on whether or not Joe was guilty or not guilty, but we do find it really interesting that Netflix brings this to light and brings a lot of attention and a spotlight on it. So thank you, Joshua. And thank you also, Aaron, for sharing some of your experience. Do you have any final words you want to share before we end the program for tonight?
I mean, if you're wanting to reach out to somebody for info on Joe or to get to know more about it, Josh is the dude. So find him on Facebook, blow him up, send him those friend requests, slide into his DMs, but keep it PG because his fiance is super cool.
Yeah.
So does Joe call either of you? Does Joe call you still, Josh?
Oh, not me.
Well, up until I got emails from him because there's some kind of email system in the county jail that he was in, and it enabled them to send out emails. And I was communicating with them in the first part of his incarceration, but he asked me to testify for him. And like I said in the documentary, the feds were like, they called me, and the FBI guy, he said, you're either on team government or team Joe. And, what the hell are you supposed to say to that? I mean, honestly, what the hell are you supposed to say to something like that? So, I decided not to testify on Joe's behalf, and he never messaged me afterwards.
Well, if you still have his email, just go ahead and send him a link to this show and tell him you did awesome.
Yeah, somebody else send it to him. Look, do not kid yourself and think that anything that is ever said about Joe Exotic online does not get back to Joe Exotic, because I promise you.
Yay! I'm hoping he watches this. If it means anything, Joe, if you're watching this, I really hate Carole.
Yeah, like Joe was right about Carole.
Yeah, fuck Carole, and I want to be your friend. I look just like her.
All right,
guys. Thank you again so much. And again, just let Joe know that this exists and we can be friends.
And we hate Carole.
And we fucking hate Carole.
Everybody should hate Carole.